of Life Service. We're so happy that each and every one of you are here in person and even on the live stream and watching online and anywhere else you may be watching. My name is Mitch. I am Jane's older brother. And tonight we're going to, just to set the stage, kind of what we're going to do this evening, we're going to sing a couple songs because Jane, one of the things that I loved doing with Jane and that Jane was obviously known for was singing, and obviously she loved to worship the Lord. So we're going to worship tonight.
Good evening, everybody. When planning this service, I intentionally did not place myself right after the video. Then Dad texts me this morning and goes, yeah, I don't want to go after the video. I'd rather go at the end. So I said, cool. So yeah, I am struggling, everybody. But the beautiful thing is Jane, this is what Jane would have wanted. It's for us to be able to spend time sharing not only the fun things about her life, not only the inspiring things about her life, but the faith that drove her, the faith that allowed her to be the person that she was, and that is. So obviously, as you all know, Jane was an amazing woman, and there are so many things I can share. There are not enough things, there's not enough time, there aren't enough words to talk about her grit, her persistence, her dedication, all of those things. But tonight I want to share just a handful of lessons that I learned from her, a handful of things that were really impactful to me and that continue to be impactful to me. But the first thing that I want to do, though, before I get into that, is I want to honor somebody else tonight. So in 2020, as many of you know, Jane, it was January 2020. We all, us 4 siblings, drove down to Nashville to move her out of her house and then to send her on to California to start some of her treatments. And that was when she was given 3 to 6 months to live. So I went out with her initially for the first handful of weeks just to get her settled in. All of my friends at Rev Local and all of my friends and family here at Cornerstone really helped and supported me during that time and allowing me to be with Jane. But I had to come home at some point. There was some point that I have a family. I had two children, one on the way at the time, and we were just at the point where Jane needed somebody to be out there full time with her. And I just want to say how proud I am of Andrew, my brother. Without Andrew, I truly don't know where Jane would be. He spent 2 years of his life, two years, leaving everything behind to move to California, to stay with Jane, to take care of Jane, to be with Jane, to love Jane, to make sure that she survived, which is a tough thing. When she was with Abby, at least, she was a tough thing. By herself, she was okay. When Abby came into town, Andrew had to keep a tight leash on those two, for sure. But Andrew, I think, is somebody, the only reason I bring this up is because if any of you know Andrew is not the type of person that would trumpet that from the rooftops. He's the type of person that serves selflessly and humbly. He's the type of person that would do it because he knows it's the right thing to do. And I want to make sure that we honor him in this because he spent a good chunk of his life taking care of Jane. And he's going to need our prayers and our support even moving forward. So I love him, care about him, really thankful for his impact in Jane's life and even the lessons of perseverance and grit that I've even learned from him. So just want to acknowledge Andrew and tell him thanks. Thanks for doing that. So Jane's impact in my life, honestly, it can't be overstated. There aren't enough words to talk about it. There aren't enough stories to tell. There aren't enough things for me to even come up with for me to be able to do that. But there were a couple things of lessons that I learned, things that she brought to me that were helpful. So if any of you know me in any way, shape, or form, you will know that I tend to avoid conflict. I'm an avoider by nature. Typically, I'm kind of like, you know what, like we can probably find an amicable solution to this. We can talk about it a little bit and kind of make it work. I mean, as my friends at Rev Local know, like it's not a great way to build a team and grow a career by just being nice to everybody always and giving them everything they want at all moments. So it was one of those things that it is a growth point for me. It's something that I've been thinking about and for a while. And so I'm at the house with Jane, and I'm just like kind of walking through the room, and she just like out of nowhere, she goes, "Mitch, you'd be way more successful if you would just let somebody dislike you." And I was like, I was like, oh, interesting. I didn't know it was unsolicited advice day. So if that's the case, I would really love for you to let me go get my list, bring it in here, and be able to share a little bit of that with you this fine Wednesday. But so we were kind of talking about it and we were joking because she was right. She's like, I would be a much more successful person if I would like allow somebody to dislike me at some point. And so we were joking, and I was like, you know what, you should write a children's book. Like, this would be like, this is something you should do, you know. And I said, what do you think you should call it? And she goes, just like this, like, because it's Jane. She just has it all planned out, apparently. She goes, let someone dislike you and see how far you'll go. Very Dr. Seuss sort of ring to it. So I was like, all right, I'll give you that. I said, who do you want to illustrate it? Again, boom, she goes, Banksy. And I was like, this is the most self-aware book that's ever been thought of or any sort of existence, like, so on the nose. But Jane was like consistently, like, I think she knew me better than I knew myself in a lot of ways. And Jane was like my best friend for like my entire life. Like, we were just joined at the hip. I'm older than her by 22 months-ish, and we just would do everything together. We would, everything from driving to school together, driving to practice together, anything from taking Andrew when he was very young and sticking him on top of the Little Tykes Playhouse roof and then just leaving him there. Like, we came back inside and Mom was like, where's Andrew? We're like, he's on the roof. We came in to get something to drink. But Jane was one of those people that she always had the right thing to say when she needed to say it. And she knew how to do it in such a way, with me at least. She did it with me because we were close enough that she could just be a jerk and I would be like, okay. But I'm gonna miss those things. I'm gonna miss those little insights that she had into my life because she was detached from it enough by being in California that she could look into it and she could give me really, really good advice. But another element of Jane's life that I learned something from and continue to learn from her, and it's something that's been shared consistently over even this evening, is that Jane was a very generous person. And she wasn't just generous with her money, but she was generous with her time. She was generous with her emotional energy. She was generous with the people that she spent her time with. And she was generous with her money. Like, throughout all of her life, she was always giving, always serving, always wanting to help those who were in need. So whether it was kids on Garfield Avenue in Lynchburg, just having block parties and having the kids come in and being able to take care of them and help them, or whether it was her taking time out of her life to go over on Thursday nights to the Davidson County Jail in Nashville and sit and read the Bible and pray with people that were in prison. Like, Jane was consistently giving, and she was consistently looking for ways to bless other people. And it was just this others mindset that she had, because she understood that came because Christ had given all that he had for her. So how much more should she give all that she has for others? So when Jane, thinks about her money and she thought about the way that her time worked and all those sorts of things, she saw it as a gift to be given, not as something to be hoarded and kept. She was always approaching it that way. And so over the summer, when she and I were, we were sitting on the roof at the Airbnb in San Clemente, where we were sitting on the roof just talking, and I loved sitting with her and just trying to get her to dream. Like, I just wanted to know what was in her head. I was like, where are you gonna live? What kind of car are you gonna drive? Are you gonna have 2 houses, or are you gonna have 3 houses, or you just have 1 big house? Like, what are you gonna do next? And she was always be like, okay, I'm gonna release this album next year, and then I'm gonna buy a house in 12 South in Nashville, and really close to Celeste, because I love Celeste. And it's a great neighborhood. And she was always dreaming and always thinking. And so we were talking a lot about all the GoFundMe money that she had kind of accumulated over the last couple of years, because people were very generous towards Jane in her healthcare journey, where insurance wouldn't cover treatments, and she really was up against a wall financially. A lot of people came to the table and really gave. So I was asking Jane, I was like, what do you think we should do, with all of that cash? Because we didn't feel like it was right for us to keep, especially when she got better. Like, that was the thought. I was like, okay, when you get better, what are we gonna do? And so we were having that conversation, and that was when the idea of the Nightbirde Foundation came to be, where we would take all of that leftover money and we would create a nonprofit foundation to be able to help those people that were like Jane, that were artists that couldn't afford health insurance. There were artists that couldn't make it on their own. Because Jane had actually been part of a couple of those grant programs where she was the direct recipient of people's generosity towards her. So when she and I were talking about that, that was really where the seed was planted. And then when she passed, like, I couldn't help but remember that conversation of like, what would Jane want to do with the money that she had left over? And so we've decided to set up this Nightbirde Foundation to be able to carry her legacy forward for people that have breast cancer. And really, it's because of the generosity that she continued to have throughout her entire life that compels even us now to want to continue that generosity forward. So this is not a sales pitch. I'm not telling you to, donate or whatever, but if you want to. It's on the back of your program. It says Nightbirde Foundation. So what we're going to do is we're gathering donations through GoFundMe right now. And the goal for us is to be able to create a foundation that's going to be able to help another Jane. That's going to be able to help people that are in need, help with travel expenses, and help people be able to get the treatment and the places that they want to have it. So the last thing that I want to share is that Jane taught me, is she taught me about hope. And she taught me about holding on to promises. And as many of you know, if you don't know by now, I don't know if you've been listening, but Jane's faith was a very large portion of her life. It was a big piece of who she was. So in the midst of her journey, she consistently relied on her faith to drive her. She consistently relied on her faith to be the thing that gave her the hope that she had. And Andrew alerted to it earlier, it's really easy to sing and to worship and to trust God when things are going really well. It's a very difficult thing to do that when you get that cancer diagnosis, when you're struggling to breathe, when you constantly feel horrible, when you don't know whether you're going to see your nieces and nephews at Christmas time. It's a lot harder to trust in the Lord then. And it's a lot harder to have hope when you're up against a wall. But what Jane had was greater than wishful thinking. And what Jane had was more than just this mysterious, intangible light that sort of exists in her being. Jane had a hope. She had a hope that was beyond this world. She had a hope that no matter what the outcome was going to be, whether she lived another 65 years or whether she died last week or 2 weeks ago, the outcome was going to be good because she knew the promise that the Lord had given her that she was going to be restored, that she was going to be able to be with him forever. And it's not just something that we think about on death's door. That drove every decision that Jane made. The hope that she had was what allowed her to say things like, you don't have to wait till life isn't hard anymore before you decide to be happy. It's the thing that constantly drove her to be the positive inspiration that all of us saw on television. But it wasn't just because Jane pulled herself up by her bootstraps. And it wasn't just because Jane had this innate ability to willpower her way through. And it wasn't just because she was super strong, which she was. She's the strongest woman I've ever met, strongest person I've ever met. All of those things are true about Jane. But they weren't true about Jane because she was Jane. They were true about Jane because Jane had a hope in Jesus. Jane's hope wasn't just being famous, it wasn't just money, it wasn't just notoriety, it wasn't any of those things. It was the fact that she was going to be with her Savior forever. So those of us in the room that are followers of Jesus, we can be encouraged by that hope in our circumstances. And I think that's what Jane would want us to hear today, is that we don't simply have to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We don't simply have to work harder, do better, be gooder. We don't have to do any of those things. But rather, we can rely on the hope that God has never, ever, ever been unfaithful, and he's not going to start today with you. And for those of you that don't believe in Jesus, that don't have that relationship, that don't rely on him as a hope, I really hope and I pray that today you would see the light that was inside Jane was Christ. And that you have that same access to that hope through Jesus as well. You don't have to fight. You don't have to work. You don't have to do any of those things to find salvation and meaning and satisfaction. You can find it in him. Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of hopeless people out there. There's a lot of hopeless people in this room watching on the live stream. But the good news today is that you don't have to remain hopeless. You don't have to remain hopeless. You don't have to wonder what's going to happen when you die. You're not going to have to wonder what's going to happen with your life. Because Jesus Christ died on that cross for our sins while we were still sinners. He did it before we did anything. He saw it fit to forgive us. And we have access to that forgiveness today. So today, as my dad's gonna come up next, let's just let that roll over in our minds for like the remainder of the night, of the fact that the hopeless people in the world have the ability to find hope. And Jane was a perfect picture of what finding that hope looked like. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Please kindly subscribe, share us out, and don't forget to smash the notification bell for more news updates.